Good afternoon to all. Good evening to some. Hope you guys are having a great Wednesday. I can't believe we're here with another monthly theme. It literally feels like time is speeding up for me. I don't know if anyone else shares those sentiments. But as always, I'm really excited to be here and to do this. And as I was mentioning to Jeff before we started the recording, my start in the health industry was through the entry point of exercise. I wanted to be an exercise professional to help myself become a better competitive athlete. And then I fell in love with the human body just because I realized how amazingly adaptable and capable it was through the lens of physical ability. And I've had, the pleasure of studying with some incredibly brilliant minds in the exercise world. I studied with the godfather of exercise mechanics, as he's considered in Oklahoma. And I can honestly say that without that exposure to exercise and without the indoctrination, and I use that term positively here, the positive indoctrination of thought process, I don't think I would be the clinician I am today for two reasons. One, the thought process can be summed up in the context of question everything through exercise. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but it's also the same in health. Very often we're just told things, and if influential people that we decree to be influential, tell us things, then we, generally speaking, take them at face value. But if you question things, you might actually poke holes in things that are generally accepted. And as a result of that, you may be able to garner something out of what may be incomplete as a thought. And you may therefore have the ability to do something that other people can't do. And the other aspect of learning how the body works from a lens of exercise is when you start to have a perspective of understanding imposed stresses and aspects of, we'll call it physical resilience on the body, and you start to think about the concept of health as it relates to exercise, you see how, at least in my opinion, I think exercise is the single greatest supplement that we have. There is nothing that comes in a bottle, a powder that you can shake up, that you can take with water, that will outdo the benefits of what exercise provides for you in a health context, especially in a gut context, believe it or not. Maybe you'll believe that. But that's kind of what I want to illustrate today. We are health professionals, and some of us are athletes, some of us are competitors, some may work with athletes, but the vast majority of people here who will be listening to this now and in the future are going to be individuals who want to help others get healthier. So I'm going to be setting the tone as a health professional looking at exercise today through a few different lenses and layers. So I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared here. Why won't my Zoom pop back up? That's because it's in the corner. Bear with me for a moment, please. Okay. We're going to do that thing. So supplements for your performance and for your health. And hopefully at the end of this lecture, I will have convinced you that health and performance are very much interdependent and that one ideally should and usually does precede the other. So as always, I like to define things. What is health? I don't think there is a universally accepted definition. Maybe there's something in Webster's dictionary, but even then, I don't think that that is entirely complete. One of the best definitions of health that I've ever heard, and it's a mouthful, is the absence of disease with the context of the balance between building processes, anabolic and breakdown processes, given the life cycle of an organism. Say that 3 times fast. What that basically means is just because you're not sick, it doesn't mean you're healthy. There has to be an element of regeneration consideration, but also an age consideration, because what a 30-year-old can do physically is probably not the same that a 70-year-old can do physically. Jeff Thurston might be different because he's clearly ageless, but the vast majority of people think health is simply not having a disease. You could not be having a diagnosed disease, but you could feel like absolute crap. I also think that health is, to a large part, subjective in terms of what someone's idealization or personal desires and goals are for their health context. So it's probably the combination of all the variables of the things we tell our clients that they go, yeah, I'll do that. I'll sleep better. I'll eat better. I'll get some exercise. I'll do my stress management techniques. It's all of these things that really define health. Notice how I didn't say anything about physical abilities within health, because I think you can be healthy and maybe not necessarily fit. but you can also be fit and not necessarily healthy. Because when you're talking about performance, performance is an externally focused, likely future forward goal dependent thing. What I mean by that is if you're training for an event, at some point you're going to compete, and you're going to compete against others that your performance is going to be measured against or compared against. So for me, performance is always akin to winning trophies, medals, a grading system. And as my exercise mentor would say, when it's about trophies, it's not about health. And that's in the context of exercise. But it doesn't mean that you can't have a nice balance and relationship between health and performance. For example, as a health professional, we outsource our idealization or maybe our understanding of fitness to the fitness professionals. And we tell our clients to get some exercise. If you tell your clients simply get exercise, you're really not providing them a lot of insightful suggestions or advice. You're just telling them to do something that they may not have any idea as to what to do. And if you don't, as an individual, exercise with some degree of performance consideration, what I mean by that is the body being adaptable only gets as tolerant, it only progresses as much as it needs to given the stress that you expose to it. So if someone only ever runs 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, there's going to be a point to where their ability to increase their fitness and ultimately potentially their cardiovascular and metabolic health will reach its endpoint. At least them being somewhat active will have a maintenance thing. But if someone is sedentary, as time goes on, they will lose any aspects of fitness and performance capabilities, and with that goes health. So I think as a health professional, your job is to guide someone on understanding positive and negative decisions when it comes to their health or their health status. If you don't know anything about exercise, it does behoove you to have a basic understanding, A, if it's going to be something you suggest to your clients, but as you dive into exercise as a health professional, you realize how if you have some base knowledge of exercise modalities, then you can actually pair these things no differently than you combine supplements to create a protocol or combine dietary principles to create a specific diet that your client potentially needs. So the average person gets overwhelmed because they focus on things like exercise names, sets, reps, and all that stuff. I think that's secondary. You need to think about what the body response that I wish to accomplish by making the suggestion to my client is, and then you can get into the details of that. You have to ask, what is exercise doing for my client and what needs do they currently have? And then the second thing is, what are they accustomed to? A lot of people who start CrossFit as their first exercise modality ever will probably get scared away because of how hard it is and how sore they are the next day. So you want to make sure that you can understand what your client is ready for, what that exercise or the style of exercise, which we will get into, will impart as an effect on the body. And then after you've given them a suggested guidelines of exercise modalities, you can help them build a program or maybe collaborate with a fitness professional who can help fill in the gaps and maybe, bring up the aspects of what you don't know to fill in the rest. So when we think about exercise, I think we need to think about physiologic stimuli. What does a specific style of exercise do for the person, and how does it affect the body? If we do aerobic exercise, aerobic simply means with oxygen. So aerobic exercise is synonymous to cardio. How does cardiovascular exercise affect the body? Is it more about muscle strength, or is it more about cardiac efficiency and oxygen utilization and respiratory gas exchange? How about resistance exercise or anaerobic work? Well, all exercise technically is resistance exercise, but if I want to get stronger, distance running will not make me stronger after a while. If I want to become more powerful and have more work capacity, I might need to do anaerobic exercise, which means exercise where I can't use oxygen. And if someone doesn't understand what anaerobic exercise is, well, then their knowledge of how to manipulate the metabolic profile inside of a muscle cell is somewhat limited. Then there's this concept of called mobility. And mobility is super important because as we age, not only do we lose a lot of our mobility because we get weaker, but as you lose mobility, you increase your risk for things like injuries. You increase your risk for non-contact soft tissue injuries specifically. So mobility, resistance, and aerobic exercise are all three separate things, but can all be done concurrently together in a well-structured program. balance and coordination, which we don't often think about in the context of fitness, but it's why children can fall and just bounce and get back up and just dust themselves off and they're fine. And then when old people do it, you hear, I've fallen and I can't get up, and you have one of those medic alert buttons, simply because we've lost these capabilities. We've downregulated our muscle strength, we've lost mobility, we've lost proprioceptive awareness, and as a result of that, when we lose that, we become more susceptible. It's the reason that people use walkers prematurely, is because they lack the balance and coordination to deal with their own body in relation to gravity. And there's skill acquisition. Skill acquisition is more about maybe progressing in a specific thing, but it's important to progress your skill if you want to be somewhat competitive with yourself or another as you're progressing your physical abilities. If someone's ever played football in high school and they haven't done so in 15 years and they decide to pick up flag football, the brain might remember the game of football because they've been watching it on TV, but the body doesn't necessarily have the ability to do what it used to do 15 to 20 years ago. And this is where people actually injure themselves, because their level of skill and their level of ability is so deconditioned or diminished relative to what it used to be. So we have to understand that health and performance is kind of a dynamic feedback system. And this can speak to those who are athletic or competitive within themselves, or if you do work with athletes in an optimal relationship, and this is how I approach it with the athletes that I work with. When you are healthier, you create the greatest opportunity to have a higher ceiling of performance. Because as we'll talk about very soon, when your health status is compromised, your body as a whole coherent being works less efficiently. So you do less work consuming more energy. So as someone who wants to perform at a high level, not only can you not reach your ultimate ceiling of performance, but if you do so on a regular basis, your body's state of compromise is likely going to affect your ability to recover. And then over time, that's going to negatively impact your health. This is when you see athletes moving towards overtraining, eventually getting injured. It's not the exercise's fault. It's the fact that the duration of exercise, the intensity, the frequency, all the variables that are factors to consider was above the tolerances of what that person's body could accommodate or accept. So we have to understand that when we're choosing a performance-based outcome that is intending to improve our health, we have to consider the specific individual and what they're accustomed to. And the considerations for someone who may be, I don't know, a type 2 diabetic with an autoimmune condition are very, very different from a young, healthy person who may be slightly deconditioned because they got out of college and they started working and they haven't gone to the gym in 5 years. So this is the fine line between using exercise as a tool to stimulate a positive outcome, which I'll call eustress, and a negative outcome, which we will call distress. Last month, I introduced this concept, which is kind of like the guiding principle with which I look through the lens of health and how we can maintain health, not only in the here and now, but over the course of the long term. The energy and the adaptability thing kind of fills in your ability to assess how you would decide upon where to start someone. If that person is healthy and vital, you know that they have more energy to expend, and therefore they have a greater level of adaptability to tolerate stress. This is how you keep the inclusion of exercise in a positive connotation. And as a result of that, over time, you will be able to see, measure, or experience performance outcome improvements. An example would be if someone can do 3 pull-ups and over the course of the next 12 weeks, they adopt a strength training program where they can do 9 pull-ups at the end of their program and nothing got injured along the way, no issues with the wrists, elbows, upper back, spine. And by doing so, you've increased their level of optimal function because their strength and their capacity has gone up. How that fits into the bigger picture is when the body can perform at a higher level utilizing less energy, it becomes stronger. It can conserve itself when it does need to output higher levels of physiologic stress. So now we got to talk about exercise and the body in general, because this meat suit avatar that we walk the world in does start as 1 cell, and it becomes 2, and it becomes 4, and so on, as I mentioned last month. All of these body systems that are required for us to be able to exercise are going to be affected in some way, shape, or form by exercise. So I think it's important to know the fundamentals of exercise and the body specifically. If you look at these specific points, the right aspects of exercise, what I mean the right aspects of exercise is a well-rounded and defined exercise program can do a lot of incredible things to improve how your physiology functions. There's a very dynamic intermixing of the brain, the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the muscular metabolism, the cardiovascular system, the lymphatic system, the endocrine system, and all the organs that help process the removal of metabolic wastes and help to break down and deliver nutrients to the system. And as a result of exercising on a regular basis, these characteristics can be things that allow people to make massive leaps and bounds in their health in the fourth, fifth, and sixth decade of life if they've never utilized these things on an ongoing basis. And because I have to mention it for being a gut-focused company or a digestive wellness company, the research surrounding exercise and gut health is starting to become very, very well defined, which is very exciting for me. So the first thing that I want to touch on is the improvement of oxygen transport and delivery. Exercise requires your body to utilize more energy to get the job done. So as a result of those stresses that you place upon the body, the most impactful thing that comes out of it is you become more metabolically powerful, metabolically efficient as a result of regularly stimulating your body through a variety of different exercises. You become more able to utilize the fuel floating around in your bloodstream. Your body can more ably tap into energy stored on the body as adipocytes, fat tissue, and your heart specifically, which is a muscle, becomes more efficient at its ability to pump blood and oxygen around the body, utilizing each beat more effectively. I remember one time reading somewhere that if you envision your heart has a certain number of beats engineered in it, if you want to extend your lifespan, slow down your resting heart rate. And that's one thing both cardiovascular and resistance exercise do, because they allow the heart to become more efficient and they allow the heart to become stronger. If you can deliver oxygen to tissues more effectively, your mitochondria can take the food calories that you ingest, hopefully digest well with the help of an enzyme, and deliver to your muscles, the working muscles specifically, and turn that food into energy. So this way you have an adequate amount of ATP, you stimulate all of these different body systems when there is an ample amount of excessive energy, and as a result of that, from a metabolic perspective, you become much stronger. The second thing that I don't think a lot of people consider when it comes to exercise is how it supports lymphatic flow and detoxification. Unlike the cardiovascular system, which has a pump and it has its pressure gradients that are influenced by exercise, the lymphatic system is more of a passive circulatory system. And the most impactful way that you can enhance lymphatic flow is through movement, is through muscles. The moving of muscles helps pump the lymphatic system around the body more effectively. And while you won't feel your lymphatic system dramatically change as a result of exercise, what you are doing is when you're moving your lymph, you're connecting into your detoxification organs. You're also connecting into your immune organs. You know, your thymus and other organs of your immune system want to help detoxify your body and break things down that your lymphatic system pulls out of your cells, which essentially are chemical wastes before they get sent back to the circulatory system and ultimately arrive at the liver and the kidneys, in some cases the lungs and the skin, to be excreted from the body. During cardiovascular exercise, steady state exercise for a defined period of time, you can dramatically increase lymphatic flow, which is something that the opposite happens when you sit at a desk all day, especially when you're not getting, direct sunlight and you're not in an optimal environment. So the lymphatic system being kind of like the sewer system of the body, knowing you need to help it move itself, exercise and movement is the best way to do so. The other thing that exercise does really well is it helps to retrain peristalsis, and it also helps to stimulate enhancements, which we'll talk about in detail, at the microbiome level. We have to remember in our gut is a nervous system of about 80 billion neurons called our enteric nervous system. And for many people who experience things like IBS, motility issues, but more specifically constipation, part of that issue is the ablated communication between your brain, your spinal cord, which is your central nervous system, your brain, your spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves coming off of your spine, which is your autonomic nervous system, and how the autonomic nervous system communicates downwardly to your enteric nervous system to make sure that the speed of your digestive system is optimized to both break down, absorb, and remove waste at an appropriate speed for your physiology and how it works. Most people suffering with gut issues, specifically motility issues, have some sort of nervous system dysregulation. The reasons for that are more complex than I can get into today, but exercise being something that rewires and restores communication within our body systemically seems to lend itself to be very beneficial for helping those with motility issues regulate themselves. It's also a very strong outlet for psychological and emotional and physical stresses. So it's something that the body can use as sort of an autonomic nervous system, enteric nervous system reset. The improvement in endocrine signaling with exercise is massive. This is a very complex graphic, but I wanted to include it just to show you all the different levels where things are happening. So not only can your body improve and increase levels of things like pro-anabolic hormones like growth hormone, testosterone, progesterone, things of that nature, but you can also actually stimulate a healthy stress response, recovery response with exercise, because exercise requires you to secrete cortisol, but it also allows you to be more efficient with utilizing other hormones that rebalance cortisol when you have your dietary strategies dialed in. An example is exercise will increase cortisol, which then releases all kinds of energy from your body to be broken down. It breaks down glycogen from the liver. It helps to lower blood glucose levels. It helps to rebalance the body's ability to utilize insulin properly. And when you eat a healthful diet after exercise, you suppress that cortisol level, which can then stimulate testosterone and other pro-anabolic hormones to increase. And you can also increase things like gray matter and how the neuroplasticity of your brain through this thing called BDNF can be enhanced as a result of exercise. So exercise has cognitive benefits in addition to the fact that it makes the sensitivity of all the hormones in your body work more efficiently so that the body can better communicate with itself. The metabolic capacities of exercise we've already kind of touched on, but the one thing that's really important to understand is that when we become metabolically dysregulated, not only do we experience changes in our endocrine signaling and our autonomic nervous systems, we experience changes at the microbiome level and we start to become less efficient at utilizing energy. So what exercise can do from a muscular perspective, resistance exercise dramatically improves the body's ability to turn glucose, carbohydrates into energy for fuel. Long-term aerobic exercise can allow us to stimulate the breakdown and release of our own fat stores so our fat tissue can be metabolized for energy. People have to understand that body composition is an important thing. And if we want to improve our body composition, i.e. reduce our fat tissue in relation to our muscle tissue, energy cannot be destroyed. It has to be converted to some other form. So fat cells have to be emptied of their storage, and those free fatty acids floating around our bloodstream have to be metabolized in some way, shape, or form. The most effective way to do so is to teach your body to become a fat burning machine. And then the wonderful physiologic adaptations that come from this is when we have a higher resting metabolic rate because we have more muscle mass, or when we have a higher mitochondrial efficiency to burn fat because we do regular zone 2 cardio, we become metabolic powerhouses. And as a result of the exercise, we become healthier metabolically speaking. And then when it does come to body composition, it is very, very strongly, I don't want to even say correlated, it's more than correlated. It's agreed upon that when we hold too much body fat, we dysregulate our body's ability to communicate with itself because adipocytes become metabolically active organs. What I mean by that is by having excessively high levels of fat tissue on the body, the fat tissue starts to participate in the metabolic conversation. So it secretes its own pro-growth factors, it secretes its own angiogenesis factors, which increase blood supply to the fat cells. They make things like estrogen, they make things like leptin, they make these different hormone regulators that confuse the brain's ability to sense satiety. So knowing that exercise is the most optimal way to maintain body composition, not just from a body fat perspective, but muscle mass, especially for women over the age of 40, is very, very important, because the more muscle you have on your body, the more calories your body burns simply by being alive. So it's a long-term proactive strategy in order to not allow you to become metabolically compromised as you get into your later years. And the last thing is enhanced muscle tone, muscle strength and size, and also connective tissue. Connective tissue is something that covers the body, and it needs to move on a regular basis. If you dive into some of the research, connective tissue is kind of like a communication highway within the system. And the only thing that allows it to develop and progress is regular force via exercise. Muscular connective tissue, and I'm talking about joints, ligaments, tendons, are one of two tissues in the body that don't have blood supply. And how they do their nutrition exchange is through a process called imbibition, which they, under appropriate forces, expend all of their waste materials. And then when the water comes in, they allow the water to bring the nutrition back into the system. If we don't move our bodies on a regular basis, our connective tissues become weak and deconditioned. But the connective tissue is also the interface between nutritional delivery and waste removal in the body. So when people complain of chronic joint pain, one thing I always do is, besides assessing their movement, look at how they move on a regular basis. Because by improving movement alone, you can help stimulate the body's ability to detoxify, but also build the fabric of actually what holds us together, because connective tissue covers the entire thing. So exercise as a supplement has an incredible multi-organ feedback system available to it. Exercise being a stress does impose a stress upon the body, but providing it is an appropriate level for the given individual, those stresses lead to positive feedback mechanisms and positive adaptations when it comes to systems that we don't necessarily think about. Because if you can help someone restore bowel function by making them move their body and stimulate muscle, that's a huge win if someone's been struggling with things like IBS and constipation for years. The fact that most people walking around nowadays are in a perpetual state of sympathetic dominance, which I believe precedes all specific gut issues they may be suffering from, when you break that cycle of them being stuck in stress by allowing them to vent or utilize some catalyst to modify that stress, such as exercise, well, you have the ability to help them reprogram their own neurology and thus their own physiology. So then we have to get into the next aspect of today, and this is a new axis that was not something that I had really researched, to be quite honest with you. Only because we've been talking so much about the established axes, the gut-brain axes, the gut-lung, the gut-skin, but believe it or not, the gut-muscle axis is a thing, and this is essentially looking at how the gut microbiome, the microbiota that live in the gut, and their general makeup, metabolic activities, and how they respond to exercise influences a feedback system that helps your muscular system via metabolic capabilities of how short-chain fatty acids and the immune system respond to exercise, create another symbiosis. So we talk about how the host and the microbiome have to have a symbiotic relationship. A healthy gut means a healthy person. To me, this just doubles down on that understanding that if we exercise our body on a regular basis, our microbiome likes it. As a result of that, it can grow and change and evolve with us, and its behavior becomes something that is more reciprocally beneficial to us as the organism. So, the adaptations that we see from exercise, all the things on the left-hand side here, which are mostly metabolic and genetic and transcription, come from the fact that when we utilize our muscles in a positive way, it helps our short-chain fatty acid producing bacteria improve quantities of things like butyrate and propionate and acetate. And it crowds out the potential pathogens, providing we also feed ourselves a nutritious diet. And the feedback of how our systemic metabolic health positively responds to exercise makes our muscles better at burning energy, not storing fat, becoming more metabolically powerful overall. I think this is a wonderful thing, because it's yet another thing to show us how important the gut is for systemic health. So when you look at exercise as a gut supplement, you see things like changes in the body's ability to upregulate anti-inflammatory responses. By exercising on a regular basis, the second point I thought was really interesting, by reducing transient evacuation time, you leave less time for pathogens to potentially burrow through the mucosal layer and potentially get access to the circulatory systems. Regular exercise changes the expression of certain genes. So in the gut, you don't have such a pro-inflammatory response under certain conditions like pro-inflammatory pathogen stimuli. And short chain fatty acids produced by microbes can actually stimulate the master energy regulator of metabolism in muscle cells. So what happens in the gut can actually have a systemic effect in every single muscle cell in your body. And next to the brain, the muscular system is actually the most metabolically active organ we have. There is a double-edged sword here, however. When exercise is excessive and intensity, in addition to prolonged exercise, excessive duration, that can actually push you in the other direction. So intestinal permeability can increase via chronic overexercising or chronic overtraining. So as a result of that, you can actually supercharge the effects of gut issues, which brings you back to my original statement. If you have someone who is in a compromised state of health and they think they need to have an intense workout to be given the gold star for doing a good job, that is counterintuitive to the concept of helping them with their health. You have to understand that if someone's gut's in a compromised state, their stress tolerance and overall adaptability is in the same state. So knowing how to prescribe this and knowing this bidirectional communication system, I think is very important. And here's a very good representation of essentially what happens. The right kind of exercise not only stimulates the gut-brain axis via the HPA axis, because a little bit of stress is good for you, things like gut-level neurotransmitters and short-chain fatty acids can actually be synthesized and sent into the bloodstream for systemic communication. Conversely, if you overexercise, imbalances in those quantity of neurotransmitters increase amounts of lipopolysaccharides, and because your gut is an endocrinally active organ, your gut can secrete cortisol and immune stimulating cytokines, which then can be pumped into your circulatory systems, make their way back to the brain, and cause neuroinflammation via a leaky blood-brain barrier. So this is a big thing with me because chronic overexercising, I think, is more common nowadays than it ever has been because we like to push boundaries as a species. And I'll leave you all to read through these, but there's some very interesting aspects of how the gut-muscle axis via specific mechanisms of action can stimulate beneficial outcomes for our health when used appropriately, as said before. Because it really is doubling down, in this case probably tripling down, and understanding that the body is an interconnected system, and if we can somehow learn to harmonize all of the things that we suggest to our clients, the outcome can be dramatically better. So now that we've got all that stuff down, and what I mean by all that stuff is you might have to go back and listen to all those points of connection, but to summarize, understanding how exercise affects the body systemically in a general sense, I hope now you see why I call it the best supplement that we have. And knowing that exercise can be a valuable tool for people with gut issues, and if they don't think they can exercise because they don't have enough energy, it doesn't mean that they can't start somewhere, because it may be the thing that helps you synergize the positive effects of the dietary changes, the anti-stress protocols, and of course, the gut-specific supplements that you may be wanting to use. But I don't want to start today with enzymes and probiotics. I'm actually going to start with Proteinxym, which is something that we've never spoken about before. And there are so many different protein powders on the market, and there's so many different kinds of protein powders. I wanted to take a little bit of a deep dive into this to hopefully encourage you all to try Proteinxym if you never have, but also to make it a mainstay for people who are active, who may not be getting adequate calories, the right kinds of calories or quality protein in their diet. But B, for people who do have gut issues, an important consideration is digestibility, because we assume that simply eating ensures our nutritional status and nutritional adequacy. I don't believe food is the most important factor in life. I believe digestion is. And when people have compromised digestion, complex proteins and mixed meals of various macronutrients might be a lot on their system. And if someone is protein deficient, most protein powders are simply protein. They're not protein plus plus plus. And if you look at this label, you'll understand why I say plus plus, because what Proteinxym has in it, besides a complete protein source, which we'll talk about, are the necessary cofactors to support digestion and diet, the necessary cofactors to support micronutrient and trace minerals, and those cofactors also stimulate antioxidant responses, as well as act as another agent of microbiome stimuli, because things like polyphenols in different colored fruits and vegetables actually get acted upon by the microbiota, and they produce beneficial byproducts of metabolizing things like proanthocyanidins in blueberries and ellagic acid in pomegranate seeds. The protein debate between plant proteins and animal proteins will probably wage until humans are no longer a species and some other species will evolve and pick up the argument. A complete protein is a very simple concept. It means all essential amino acids are present. In the plant world, there are only two complete proteins I can think of, technically. One is quinoa and the other is soy. Most soy is not food to me, and in order for you to get adequate amounts of quinoa protein, you need to probably stomach 500 to 600 grams of carbohydrates, which would probably make anyone hyperglycemic. The long and short of creating a protein powder from plants is really all about the combination. And you can see on the right-hand side, all essential amino acids in Proteinxym have an adequate quantity of amino acids per serving. And how we do this is through selective combinations. So if you take one plant protein that may be missing one essential amino acid, and you swap it with another protein, or you add, rather than swap, you combine it with another protein that contains that amino acid that's missing, you complete the profile. And that is important because one thing that we need to talk about when it comes to exercise is hopefully the goal is to increase muscle tissue growth, i.e. muscle protein synthesis. And when we break down tissue, we need amino acids to repair what it is we do. Next to water, protein is the most abundant tissue in the body, and muscle protein is a very specific sequencing of protein that has a decent amount of turnover. And the average human who's sedentary on the low side, and I wouldn't even start someone here, needs about 0.36 grams of protein per pound of body weight a day. And that is an amount or a level that if you're on bed rest will stop protein wasting or cachexia, sarcopenia. If you're an athlete and you're training multiple times per week, or you have the goal to build muscle mass, you are going to need more protein to stimulate the anabolic response from exercise. And from a research perspective, 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is likely the high end of where it's a beneficial amount of protein to eat on a regular basis. Some people go higher. I don't think protein is a really good fuel source, and I've been in a gym with a lot of young guys who want to look good on the beach, and a positive nitrogen balance, when not properly tolerated by a digestive system, makes a fart that can curl your toenails. But I'll save you any more details about that story. So Proteinxym, being a complete protein, is also so much more, because besides having the basis of protein, enzymes, probiotics, and prebiotics plus polyphenols, it also supports muscle protein synthesis and the antioxidant system because of what it provides. It is also something that allows you to support your gut and your immune system because of the enzymes and the immunostimulatory effects of the strain-designated bacteria that we know that are in there. The combination of the proteins that Proteinxym has are incredibly well tolerated by most people, because whey protein, for the vast majority of people out there, especially those with dairy sensitivities, creates more problems than it does benefits. So combining pea protein, brown rice, hemp, flax, and chia rounds out that protein source, in addition to adding the superfood blend, which, let's be honest, most people don't get enough fruits and vegetables living in a world full of convenience. So the different kinds of berries, the high vitamin C content of acerola cherry, the cruciferous vegetables and their anti-cancerous, anti-estrogenic effects of some of the compounds that are in there are very beneficial add-ons, which allow you to turn this from a protein supplement into more of a meal replacement when you pair it optimally with different recipes. And the fact that we use stevia and sea salt also means there's no artificial sweeteners, which are horrible for the microbiome. There's no additional sugars, which is not something that you necessarily want in high quantities ever. And Where we can, we use organic ingredients, be it 76% to be specifically exact, of the ingredients in Proteinxym are organic origin. And I've included some really awesome recipes because the difference between a protein supplement and a meal replacement sometimes is just down to creativity. And if you're wanting to help either your clients find new strategies to be not only healthy and convenient, you can take Proteinxym as a protein base and add different kinds of healthy fats, fruits, vegan milks, and various other supplements. You can even open a capsule of chlorozyme or two in there, although it's going to look kind of weird. It would be a way to supercharge the effects of what you can do when it comes to formulating different recipes. And I just want to say that this month is the promo on Proteinxym, so it is 15% off through the course of the month when you use the code. The other thing I want to talk about is something we did, and I believe it's last year, and at the end of the lecture, I think Jeff can come on and tell me specifically when, but because I've been working in the world of sport for quite some time, and I look at what industry's trends are there, I realize there's a massive opportunity. Most sports supplements, when people think about them, are focusing on energy. So it's pre-workout stimuli, it's amino acids, it's proteins, maybe it's quick digesting carbohydrates. And there are very few companies out there who are bridging the gap between performance and health in a supplemental space. You may be looking at these products and go, well, these are the products you guys have for specific clinical conditions. It's like, well, yes, they are, but the perspective of how to use these products is actually where the value is. Only because there's really no product out there for young athletes when it comes to supporting their digestive health. And I know that there are more and more inquiries regarding how to support the health of digestive athletes from the athletes themselves or from the coaches that are interacting with the athlete on a regular basis. In competitive sports, we're outside the boundaries of doing something that is solely focused on health because it is about the competition. And athletes are intermixing with each other perpetually in constant close proximity. So when one of them gets sick, unfortunately, all of them get sick. When they get stressed, what happens to the microbiome? Well, that's where a probiotic could come in. That's why Theralac Pro is so valuable, because again, there's not a lot of good probiotics in the sports space. And the third thing to think about is recovery, because exercise itself is a stress. It is the recovery and the speed and the quality of your recovery that determines when you become overworked or not, but it also is the recovery and the activity of your immune system that allows your body to regenerate the capacity to improve itself from a physical perspective. That's where Therazyme comes in, because it is a systemic enzyme that works across multiple body systems to help your immune system break down old inflammatory proteins, either from metabolism, from digestion, or from just wear and tear on the physical body itself. There's a really, really good article I encourage people who are fitness minded to look at, and it dives very deeply into the connection between physical exercise and the microbiome and different implications for competitive athletes. Because if we go back to the idea of energy and adaptability leading to optimal function, the more we ask of our athletes, especially at a young age before they're physiologically fully developed, or as they're actually mature athletes who don't have the physical capacities for recovery as they used to, these considerations become much more important. Exhausting exercise, besides depleting you physically from an endocrine perspective, can be the source of generating an initial injury, can be the source of causing chronic depletion. And as a result of the depletion of energy resources, our immune system doesn't have the same amount of energy in order to take care of itself, but also be hypervigilant to fight off things that may be coming in from the external world. And as a result of that, the immune system, which spans all the different systems of organs in our body, has the inability to be mindful of taking care of our physical health, in addition to keeping us safe from external threats like infections, toxic burdens, chemical overloads, and things of that nature. So the young athlete who's doing this to themselves on a regular basis potentially leaves them susceptible to physical changes that may not be thought of in this context until it becomes too problematic. What I mean by that is, if you take a young female athlete and she stresses herself so much to the point where she loses a reasonable amount of body fat, and she becomes amenorrheic, which is part of what's called the female athletic triad, where their bone density decreases, overall energy drops, and they lose their menstrual cycle, that is a potentially long-term hazardous thing. But the sports world, I think, needs to be brought up to speed on these things because it is not rather something that's talked about on a regular basis. So you can see why we wanted to go into this world with some of our products, because they're not only meant for clinical use when someone's suffering, they can be performance products providing they're being used intelligently, strategically, and if you understand the interplay between physical activity, health, and regeneration or recovery, you can see where these things plug in. And it's, a little personal motive because I wish to bring more health to the world of sports and fitness in general. So now that we've covered that, we've covered the understanding and the interconnection point between exercise and health. We've talked about how Proteinxym is one of the most underutilized health supplements for active people, be it young athletes, old athletes, or people who just want to be healthier in general and support their recovery from exercise. And finally, talking about the LGC informed sport products, which besides being something that we're trying to bring out for the world of fitness, to get an LGC informed sport certification, the products have to go through an extremely rigorous battery of tests for not only banned substance, but for chemical toxicants, heavy metals, things of that nature. All of the products pass with flying colors. So even in a clinical context, if someone's not into the world of athletics, it's a feather in the cap for the company knowing that we're providing the most pure products and the cleanest products we possibly can, because you want to be able to give your clients the best quality stuff that's out there. So when we bring it together and close it off, there's two areas that I want to kind of round out and summarize. If you're a health professional and you wish to be able to suggest exercise-related inclusion to your clients, or if you want to know more about yourself, there's a system of operation that you should think about. First and foremost, I think you need to assess the health of the person in some way, shape, or form before you start telling them how to exercise or how much to exercise via selecting intensity. Know what they're accustomed to and start with the least amount of unaccustomed activity, and that's very much a subjective thing for the individual. When it comes to the characteristics of exercise that are foundational, everyone benefits from improving their aerobic base. If you can utilize oxygen more efficiently in the process of calories to make energy, you are a metabolically healthier being. That will always be something that will extend your health span and lifespan in the long term. If you wish to be physically well-rounded, focus on improving strength, range of motion, and muscle control in addition to doing the aerobic stuff, because this way you build strength and endurance. If you wish to progress this over time, the key is making sure that your overload or your stress increase is gradual. It is something that your body can tolerate, and it shows you so by improving its abilities so that you keep having to increase the overload in a healthful way. And the last thing is figuring out what works best for the individual, because someone will like going to the gym where someone else will like trail running. But the most important thing is when you find what works, you have to be consistent, because unfortunately, exercise has to be done. It cannot be outsourced to a supplement or a bottle. On the supplemental side, supplements and exercise go together like peanut butter and jam. So the first thing that I always tell people, if you're increasing your overall activity, you will have an increased need for protein. More than ever, people want a high quality vegan source protein. We have that plus more because of what Proteinxym provides. When you are exercising more, there will be a natural desire to eat more. So more food means more digestion. So the ability to break that food down is the most important quality when it comes to assimilating those nutrients and using them to help your body recover. In order to recover, be mindful of what your digestive system is doing, because supporting your gut health and the systemic metabolic benefits that come from a healthy microbiome, utilizing probiotic supplementation and prebiotics strategically, are only going to help you in the long term. And then think systemic support, meaning the products that I mentioned aren't the only ones that can be beneficial in the long run when it comes to supporting your exercise endeavors. These are the honorable mentions that I could bring in only because of what it is they do in relation to how I see the body as a system under the stresses of exercise. If I'm going to increase my protein intake, HCl, in addition to a digestive enzyme, may be beneficial. If I want to potentially enhance my body's ability to burn fat through endurance exercise, well, green tea extract has very sound research on doing just that. If I wish to help improve the viscosity of my blood to ensure that red blood cells are cycling more through the system, I might use something like nattokinase. If I wish to enhance my immune system function for recovery, but also if you dive into the research on quercetin and endurance performance, that's a performance supplement in and of itself right there. If I'm exercising intensively and I'm feeling some joint pain, maybe I want to use some serrapeptidase to help my body remodel and break down old worn out joint tissue. And if I'm exercising intensely because I want to push myself, I know my immune system is the thing that helps my body recover from exercise. So I'm going to support it by giving it what it needs in terms of fat soluble vitamins and other cofactors. And if I'm not sleeping, if I'm up in my bed, on scrolling through Instagram or whatever with bright lights coming off of my phone, my eyes are receiving that blue light. And as a result of that, my cortisol's rising, my melatonin's dropping, and I'm not going to recover well. So therefore, I'm not going to perform as well. But because of my less than optimal recovery, I become more susceptible to injury and overtraining. It's not a complex and difficult concept. The right exercise, the right diet, interacting and conversing within a healthy body will promote a healthy response and an overall improvement in short chain fatty acid synthesis, microbial diversity, enhanced secretory IgA secretions, and just a better overall interplay of communication between our gut, our microbiome, and our immune system. If we become excessively sedentary, and typically with a sedentary lifestyle comes a life of convenience, which means less than optimal food choices, what you once had, you will lose very quickly. And then unfortunately, it's going to take you a lot more work to get it back, because to be able to tolerate the exercise and stresses, we have to get our body into a better state in the first place in order to be tolerant of that stress. So this is the overarching concept today, everyone. I hope this was helpful. I really enjoyed diving into this topic and sharing this with you. So I want to thank you as always. And we'll be back with another topic next month that might be a part one of a part two series. We'll have to let you know.